do please take your seats. Claudette, would you like to come on up? Let me just introduce myself. My name is Dave. I'm one of the, I'll move out of your way just for a moment. I'm one of the pastors here at Gold Hill. And it's my privilege this evening to have the chance to have a conversation. That's all we're really doing this evening, having a conversation with Claudette, hearing some experiences that she's had in the last year and what it is that she's learned through that, what it is that God's been teaching her through that. So can I pray for us?
Yes.
For all of us as we begin. Father God, thank you that you are alive. Thank you that you are at work. Thank you for the story that Claudette is about to share with us and for everything you've been teaching her. I pray that you would be very close to her in these next moments, that you would be in her thinking and in her speaking, but you would also be in our listening, that we would each be able to attune to what it is you are seeking to say to us this evening, whether this is a strange experience for us or a common one. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. So, Claudette, thank you so much for being willing to do this. Do you want to just introduce yourself briefly to anyone?
I'm Claudette Johnson and have been a member here with my husband Ridgely for a number of years, and
Yeah. And let's get straight to it, shall we?
Sure.
What experience is it? What is it that you experienced earlier in this year?
Yeah, early in this year, in January, I went to, deliver some things to a group of needy people, and I contracted body lice.
And for those here who have not contracted body lice,
I hope.
Can you explain what that means,
Yeah.
what that looks like,
Yeah.
what impact that had?
Yeah. So I was aware of it pretty quickly, of some bites and itching, and I tried to ignore it. And I think it was about 3 or 4 days later, the itching and the crawling and debris in the bed, I said to my husband, I think we have a problem. And later made an appointment with the doctor, and by the time I got to the doctor, she said, oh my goodness, they've really traveled. She looked at the backside of me, and she said they're head to toe. And she didn't want to touch me. She was washing her hands already, and she gave me a lotion and potion and said, go do this. And off I went. And at that point, I was going to tackle it, was very positive. The difficulty was that realizing that these insects, they lay their eggs in fabrics, soft furnishings, clothing, bedding, cars, wherever there's fabric, and sometimes on people, was something we had to get our minds around.
And so what did that mean for your just daily routine and normality? What did normality look like?
Well, it became very difficult because we wrapped, we went to single beds so that Ridgely wouldn't get infected, wrapped the mattress in plastic, sealed it shut, and every day I would put on a fresh set of sheets because one of the ways of treating it was washing, and I would take a couple hours and wash every little bit of myself. And then I would clean and I would vacuum, and it was just very arduous, very onerous routine. And I would sit on a little plastic chair. I wouldn't sit on a sofa. And I was told that I was a social health risk, so I wasn't really to leave the house. And
how long was that? So that arduous routine of washing, not being able to leave the house, not being able to be comfortable, really. How long did that last? 5 months, except for a little break when we thought we were clear and went off to New York and then Barbados, but I was actually still infected. And we're going to come to that little bit of the story later on. But 5 months, and of something which sounds awful. And so far we've just talked about sort of what that meant externally, what that meant in terms of practicalities. What we really want to talk about, and we've got notes here, this is not an ad hoc, this is not an ad-libbed conversation completely. There you go, the curtain's been lifted. We have thought about this beforehand, and there are a few different areas in terms of the impact that had on you in yourself that I want to sort of explore, both in terms of why they were so difficult, but also what it was that lifted you out of that, because they're real stories of both hardship and suffering and of God's grace reaching to you within that. So what's the first one that we were going to talk about?
Well, the first thing was isolation.
And isolation in terms of isolation from people? What kind of
isolation from people primarily, but also, I mean, just from life. I mean, for me, I'm a person who really values my independence, and I like to control my life. Okay, I'm a control freak, my kids have told me. And it's not controlling others so much, although they might say differently, but it is having control over myself. I don't like to be told what to do, and, but these lice, they lay 200 to 300 eggs in a lifetime, and those will hatch in 7 to 10 days, and they lay eggs, and so you can imagine, you get a little out of control, and so that was difficult. And yeah, I was a really miserable prisoner of this situation, and I enjoy relationships, and I couldn't meet up with people. I couldn't go have a coffee. Yeah.
And like you say, because not being able to go in your car, you weren't able to get out, and you had to stay in your house. So there was that deep sense of being shut off from the world.
Yes.
What was it that reached into that isolation and helped to pull you out?
Well, every morning I would wake up and I would just treasure the time, because I could have my cup of coffee and my little quiet time with God. I'd read my Bible, but because the insects were biting and crawling, I couldn't concentrate, so I couldn't do it for very long. So one dear friend gave me a CD set on the book of Job, which is all about suffering, so I loved that. That really ministered to me, and was a great way to start this awful journey. Listening to Christian radio was really helpful for me. You don't know how many songs on Christian radio are about suffering and carrying on. People would send me texts and Bible verses and songs through YouTube. All of that helped with my isolation, or to relieve it a bit. And the company of my husband, every night I just longed for him to come home and just spend time, talking and having a meal together, and
And I know that from talking that the love and support and texts and cards and emails from this church family was something that really helped to sustain you. And
this church family and our old church family as well. And friends in the neighborhood in Chorleywood. I mean, it was amazing. Yeah.
And I guess just to pause slightly on the story for a moment, there's something there for us to hold on to. There's something there for us to take note of, that we will all come here tonight knowing people, knowing situations, knowing people who are in the middle of their own dark times, their own hard times. And just the simple text or the simple card or the simple email can be a huge encouragement to them. So if there's someone and you're thinking, how can I reach out to them? It doesn't have to be big, doesn't have to feel profound. It can be very simple, but it's worth holding on to.
It is. And because I can say, beyond a shadow of a doubt, I have never known love like this. Never.
So God managed to reach into that isolation through Christian community, through his word, through prayer. What's the next area in terms of the way this impacted you?
Well, the big thing was fear. Fear and anxiety. Sometimes people would say, oh, you must be frustrated. Frustration had nothing to do with it. It was fear, raw fear.
Fear of what?
I think losing my life, or life as I knew it, that the insects would multiply so much and that I would never be clear. And every month that it carried on. And fear that my husband would contract it. It was a very expensive, well, at least the strategy we came up with for handling it was very expensive. And I was afraid he would contract it and not be able to go out to work. Yeah, so that was,
And any other things about?
Yes, my biggest fear was, or one of my fears, was missing my oldest son's wedding. I so much had a schedule in my head. I had to be clear by such and such so that we could then wait this period and make sure there was nothing, and then go to my son's wedding. So I really was afraid of missing that.
And I remember that. I remember it was almost a sort of daily journey of would we
make it?
Would we make it? Would we not make it? Would you be able to go and celebrate
Yes.
that? And you did.
Yes, we did.
You were able to be there at your son's wedding.
Yes.
What happened then?
Well, at the wedding, when we were the day we were to leave, the hospital for tropical disease said I was clear, and I wanted to believe that. And the day we were to leave, I had bites all over my arm, blood on the sheets, and the little louse ran across my And I was just like, oh, no. But we went, and it was fine. We came up with strategies. Originally had a separate room for me and so forth. It was hard to control because my clothing, and I was getting reinfected just from the things I was wearing. And then we went off to Barbados as a rest. It was scheduled as a rest. And essentially, we got asked to leave the hotel. They confronted us and said, what is the problem? What are you suffering from? And they sent us to their doctor, who happened to be a Christian doctor. And that doctor prescribed me the medicine, and one from North America with one that is here, and the two combined over a long treatment solved the problem.
Was what happened in the
Healed
end.
me, yes.
So a journey of fear of this never ending, anxiety about it getting worse, and what might happen with your husband Ridgely, and whether you'd be able to go to the wedding, and then disappointment that having had the all clear, things then came back. That roller coaster, what was it that ended up breaking that fear and that anxiety? Not just in terms of eventually you were healed and it was cured, but while you were still in the middle of it, what was it that broke the fear?
Yeah, I got to a point, I think it was after we got back from the States, and I was still infected. In fact, I was really infected. I was at the end of my rope, and I just had to say to God, your will be done. Your will be done. I give up my life, my lovely life, as I've known it. If I have to sit here on this chair, that's what you want from my life, fine. I will do it. Your will be done. And it was the hardest thing I ever said. I never have felt so wretched. In fact, Dave, I think
I spoke to you on the phone the day after, and it was you were in some ways still reeling from having prayed such a faith-filled and courageous and sacrificial prayer. Where did the strength come to pray something so bold? I'm giving up everything I know. I'm giving up my life.
Well, I reflected on Jesus' example. So God did.
What do you mean by Jesus' example?
Well, he prayed that in the Garden of Gethsemane before he went to the cross. He said, take this cup of suffering away from me, but your will be done.
So looking to Jesus' example, where else did the strength come from?
Well, I mean, people, again, prayers for me really gave me strength. I mean, I can't put a high enough value on it. There were days I couldn't put one foot in front of another, and I just wanted to die. I literally wanted to die, and it was through people's prayers that I could carry on. There was, Aldi's dark chocolate, salted chocolate, sourdough bread, dear friends gave me.
I think you got quite into the television show Suits. Is that true as well?
Suits is really good for dealing with fear and anxiety.
Okay, so
Eventually, I took some antidepressant, kind of helped keep the level down. Hospital for Tropical Disease, they saw me, that helped deal with the fear and anxiety. And there was a lab in Cambridge that would look at the samples I'd send them and give me results in 24 hours. So there was a whole host of things.
And really, it's the mixture there of those practical, physical, mundane, day-to-day human things, and God breaking into that and giving you that strength through the prayers of other people to be able to say to him, I'm going to trust you, and whatever your will is, I'm willing to walk that path. So that was where the fear, in a sense, got broken, and you were able to lay it down. The last thing we were going to talk about was to do with purpose and meaning that your life had, and what changed there?
Well, it was a real struggle because I felt like I lost, being clear became my sole purpose in life. That really, there was no other purpose. I couldn't write a book. All these dreams you have, you think, if I just had the time. I couldn't do any of those things. I couldn't concentrate. And really, another struggle was just boredom. It really is one of the last great enemies.
For those of you who don't know Claudette that well, she is a woman who does a lot.
No,
There are so many things that she sets her mind to that she wants to be doing. There's always a course you're studying. There's always a way in which you're trying to invest in yourself. There's always countless different opportunities to minister to different people and to serve people and to be with what people one-to-one, and so many different things. So I can only start to imagine the contrast between that and how it would have felt for all of that purpose and meaning to be taken away because those things were no longer possible. So what was it in the middle of all of that that gave you meaning back, that gave you purpose again?
Listening to these talks on Job was really helped my understanding and helped me to realize that I was sharing the boat with him. My husband and I started praying together for others who were suffering in the church and who were sick. And that was actually quite sweet, that time together, praying for those who are sick. And now we do it on a regular basis. Almost every night we'll pray for people. And the other thing, it was interesting, and it doesn't mean it was easy. Suffering became a platform for me to speak about Jesus, both to people in and out of the church. Our oldest son, he has experienced suffering, and he would say, "Mom, it's so authentic. You're in this, and you're talking, I can hear you." So although it was agony, didn't make it any better. I could talk about it, and people listen in a way because you're real. Yeah. You're there.
It no longer
there was a tension totally in it. You hated it, but you could talk about it.
And so then, even in the middle of it, you can see it being used by God.
Yeah, you can see it being used
bless
by
others.
God. Yeah.
So we've talked about Job a few times, and this is perhaps one of the closest parallels with Job. For those of you who maybe aren't familiar with the story of Job, it's a story in the Bible of a man called Job who loses almost everything. He loses his children, he loses his wealth in a very short space of time. Everything is taken away from him. He becomes very ill, his life is in agony, and he's left with this question of why? Why is this happening? Why is this happening to me? Is it something I've done? Is it something I'm trying to be taught? What's going on here? And for him, the great struggle in the book of Job, as he ends up talking about it with his friends and people who maybe aren't that good friends, is this question of, why is this happening to me? Trying to find purpose in the middle of it all. Trying to find this purpose that we're talking about. And we've sort of had a conversation about isolation and how God brought you out of that isolation through community. We've talked about fear and anxiety and how God broke that fear through a submission to him, really. And we've talked about a lack of purpose and God giving you not necessarily your purpose back, but a new sense of purpose and meaning. Yeah. As we've talked about this beforehand, we've sort of seen those as just kind of examples of a much bigger story that's going on. And that's the story where maybe Job hits home a little bit. So what really is your story that you want to share with people tonight?
Well, when I contracted the infection originally, I wondered what I'd done wrong. In fact, Pascal's got a little button on that says, "Why, God, why?" That was my first question. And I wondered what God wanted to correct in me. And the book of Job shows Job's friends accusing him of doing something wrong, to have brought suffering on himself. However, a closer look shows that Job did nothing wrong, that Job and God had an enemy, Satan. And behind the scenes, he was unjustly accusing Job. Satan says that Job loves God just for the good things that he's going to get from God. And so what started to hit me was, this is a big cosmic judicial trial going on. So in order to justify or actually acquit Job of these charges that Satan is making against him, God has to allow Job to carry out his plan. And this meant that Job had to suffer. Job suffers and he wants to die. He curses the day that he was born. And I too wanted to die, and got to the point where I wondered if God was good. I knew he was all powerful, but I felt so desperate that I wondered if God really wanted the best for me. Now, Satan's goal is to persuade us to turn away from God. He's our tempter and our accuser, and he wants to lead us astray. Then he accuses us before God for going astray. So Satan also in this, it was very interesting, accuses God in reality. It's God who's on trial. And I knew that there was no one to turn to except God in my pain. I knew I was being upheld by him, sustained by him, as much as I wanted to die. But at least I didn't have Job's friends accusing me that I'd brought the suffering on myself. Thank you, all you supporters. And in Job's suffering and bearing up under the accusations that Satan and his friends made against him, Job makes this declaration. He says, I know that my Redeemer lives, and in the end, he will stand on the earth. After my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh, I will see God. I will see him with my own eyes, I and not another. Jesus, like Job, was unjustly accused. He suffered and he died. And in his suffering and death on that cross, Jesus was taking on the charges that Satan makes against all of us. And like Job's Redeemer, when we put our faith in Jesus, we too can know that Jesus lives to argue our case. Why? In order to acquit us against those false charges against us. Despite the fact that we do indeed do things wrong and we are selfish. But Jesus Christ rose from the dead. He rose from that grave and is the Redeemer who Job identifies as God and who lives on so that those of us who put our trust in Jesus will live to see him. That's what I learned.
And I find it wonderful that you are able to look at what happened to you, which, as we've heard, was horrible and awful and horrid, and you're able to look within that and in the middle of that to say, I know that the only place I could turn was God.
Yeah.
I know that the only one who could uphold me was God. I know that my Redeemer lives. We've talked about isolation being redeemed by community. We've talked about fear being redeemed by hope. We've talked about lack of meaning being redeemed by new and restored purpose. Underlying all of that is a story of a Redeemer, of someone who gives value back to us and who gives meaning and purpose again. And you know and I know that that is Jesus. And I find it inspiring for myself, and I'm sure others do, that you're able to, in the middle of that place, say, I know that Jesus is alive. We sung a song earlier on this evening that says there's a reason why we can be encouraged. There's a reason why we stand here not defeated. There's a reason for so many things, and the reason is Jesus is alive. At the heart of what we as Christians believe, it is that Jesus is alive, which means that we are never alone, because he is always with us. It means that there is never a situation so hopeless because he can bring his hope into it. I want to thank Claudette for what she shared. Would you join with me in thanking her? Thank you so much. And as we continue our time together this evening, Josh and the rest of the guys are going to come up, and there's a song which is actually based on those words, I know that my Redeemer lives, which I know meant an awful lot to you in the middle of that time. Is there anything you want to say briefly about what this song meant?
No,
or just that the truth
but
of
when
it is...
y'all would pray, I could dance around the kitchen to this before I had to go through the routine again.
So maybe just with that picture in our mind.
It's really scary, I know.
But the picture of someone who is suffering being able to dance because of the truth of what we're about to hear sung. Josh is going to sing this over us, so not to join in for now, and then we'll carry on with our time together. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Claudette.